Thank you very much for these 4 very interesting presentations. I would like to invite the speakers and also Robert Jan Smits to take the seats here on the podium at the panel. While the speakers are taking their seats, I would like to make one introductory comment that could perhaps already lead into a discussion. So we've heard the terms hybrid model, Plan S, transformative agreement, and alignment as the leitmotif for the Berlin 14 conference, all mentioned at various times. And there's a way where you could bring this together. So Plan S puts a ban on the standard hybrid as we know it. But on the other hand, it calls for a transformation. Transformative agreements as such are also an approach to hybrid, but a different approach. It's a controlled approach, a contractual approach. The agreement between Diehl and Wiley that has been announced today precisely does this. It is a transformative agreement. It allows hybrid publishing in all Wiley journals for the researchers from Germany. And in that sense, it is compliant with Plan S. So the conclusion is that whether it's funders or institutions, they can work with the publishers on transformative agreements, and this way make the standard journals behind the paywall, currently still behind the paywall, as legitimate open access publishing outlets on the grounds of the provisions of Plan S. And that's perhaps something that has not been recognized so much by many of the stakeholders involved, not by the researchers themselves. I mean, there's quite some complexity to understand. It's not easy for sure, but also at the institutional side, the ones who negotiate with the publishers, but also not necessarily on the publishing side. And so maybe this is a starting comment that we could also use now in the discussions. I would like to begin with the panel and see whether one of you would have any question to one of the other presentations before we open it to the floor, because you maybe heard some comments that you regarded as interesting. I think there's a microphone here.
Let me start maybe with a question for Robert Jan Smits. About the continuity after your tenure and Vadis' tenure finishes, maybe you could comment on the longer term Plan S trajectory in Europe, and maybe also a bit more in some flesh out the detail on these transitional arrangements that Plan S requires. Are these direct contractual agreements with the Plan S consortium, or are they more widely framed as just outlined? Detail would be very useful for us to engage in them.
Well, indeed, I'm leaving on the 1st of March. I will join Eindhoven University in the Netherlands, and we are at the moment identifying or searching for a new open access envoy who can take over as a full-time person promoting Plan S and Coalition S. However, we hope that by the time I leave that we have a couple of more big countries on board, because that is what notably the larger publishers always told me. We can only flip the system when there is enough scale and scope behind open access and behind Plan S, and that's what we hope to achieve. What will be our priority at the moment? We have 3 priorities. I think first of all, the priority is to continue with the acquisition, to get new funders on board. So go global. The second priority is very much to continue discussing with the science community, talk with young scientists, established researchers, libraries, associations, learned societies. And notably the last group, the learned societies, will get a lot of attention from us because we recognize their difficulties to transform to full immediate open access. And then the third priority is very much to work on the implementation guidance, following the recommendations and the input we are going to get on the consultation. Up to date, we have already received 680 reactions, and we are not yet on the 1st of February. So, and knowing that most of the reactions always comes just before the deadline, I think we're going to get a few thousand of them. So it will be quite a job for John Arne Ruttingen and David Sweeney, who are leading the task force on the implementation, to sort it out. I'm very grateful also that you're going to give input to it. And then it is for each funding agency to implement the guideline as they deem fit. Horizon Europe, the new program, the 100 billion program of the European Union, will do things notably through the model grant agreement. Other funding agencies at national level may use different tools for implementing the guidelines. So there's full flexibility on how the different funding agencies implement the principles and the guidelines. There is one thing with regard to transformative agreements. We see, as we clearly heard also in Berlin, when we had the OA 2020 conference, but also again we saw this morning with the agreement between the Deal Project and Wiley, how important transformative agreements are with regard to moving towards full and immediate open access. And that's why I'm quite keen to develop a skeleton for these transformative agreements, based very much on what you have established now in Berlin, in Germany, which will be public, this contract, in the next month, so that it can serve as a model for other countries, for other funding agencies who are embarking now on transformative agreements. And instead of reinventing the wheel, I think it would be great if you could have a kind of a skeleton, a kind of a fixed number of principles in which we agreed that transformative agreements should adhere to. And that's something which I would like to work on in the next weeks as well, to get some guidance with regard to what a transformative agreement should look like. And that brings us then very much closer to A 2020, Plan S transformative agreements, to see how these different, say, fora can work together. One final point I would like to make, and that concerns the young researchers, because this morning there was quite a reference made also to young researchers, and I think we have representatives from the Global Academy here. I don't know if Koen is still there or not. He's there? I don't see him. Is he raising his hand? Okay, because I think it might be useful also to hear what the younger researchers say about the whole transition to open access, Plan S, because that is something which was mentioned this morning at several times, but I think it was established by either the big publishers or by the elder generation, and I think it was also useful to let the young representatives perhaps say a few words. So if Koen is back in the room, he may be willing to say a few words about it.
I would just like to maybe more make a remark than to ask a question on an issue that came up after your talk, Robert Jan Smits, this morning, where it was asked, I think it was by you, on the Meijer journals, and what is actually the problem with the Meijer journals. And the way I see it, and the way from a scientist point of view, I mean, as a scientist, you choose the venue in which you want to publish based on the standing and the prestige of the editorial and the advisory board of a journal. I do not know of any two journals in the field that have exactly identical editorial and advisory boards. So that I would find a strange thing in a Meijer journal, because it would be, I think, the first time that you have two journals with identical boards, and I don't think they exist otherwise than that. Why is that important? Because as a researcher, often my researchers ask, what can we do ourselves to promote open access? I say, well, you can publish yourself open access. And some then still also want to go for the prestige journals. I do that myself every now and then as well, so I understand that feeling. But you can also do, if you're really adamant, you can say, well, we're only going to review things if they're open access, right? Otherwise, we're just not going to review it. If everybody would do it, the problem would be solved quite fast. And so in a way, and also then you look at, if you get a review request, you look from which journal, from which board, from which advisory board comes that. And so I think that the problem that I see from the researcher side with this Meijer journal is that it is kind of a way to keep the subscription journal longer alive, because you keep that standing up. And that I find wrong. That answer didn't come out this morning, and I don't know if you share that opinion, but I thought I wanted to vow that.
That's exactly how we feel about it. And that's why I say, when I first heard about this Meijer journals, you felt in my gut feeling that there's something fishy about it. And I think it's just another attempt to continue the system, like the hybrid journals, which were supposed to be transition mechanisms, are, if it's up to many publishers, become a new business model which will be with us for eternity. And that's not what we would like to see, and that's why we took this position with regard to the Meijer journals. Fine if they are part of a transformative agreement with a very clear sunset clause.
I would now like to open up to the floor. Anthony Watkinson was the first to raise his hand, and then I have to... Maybe he was not the first, but the first whom I saw.
I pointed at him because he knows what I've been working on for the last 3 years, and that's why I'm asking to speak, because it fits in very well with what you've just been saying, actually. I've been working part of a group, cyber research, working on the ground on a longitudinal study of early career researchers. So we're following the same person year by year, we're asking virtually the same questions. And not quite the same because we improve them slightly to get better responses. Okay, and I am being responsible for the UK and the US. The other countries, which are France, Spain, China, Malaysia and Poland, and I could explain later if anybody wants to know why they're these countries, why not Germany, I could explain further, but not now. I'm responsible for UK and US, and these are all the ones I want to talk about because I know a lot about these people. Okay, one thing I can say definitely is all of them, bar one, are totally committed to open access. They believe it's just part of their moral compass. Openness, transparency, and sharing, okay? They, on the whole, do not publish open access as much as it would seem they would like to do, and this is because they want to become academic researchers and they want to get the prestige of publishing in the journals which have high impact factors. They were terribly keen on hybrid, incidentally, but that doesn't bother you, I know, because you don't care about that sort of thing. But anyhow, now, this is kept up every year. There's been no diminution as they move up the ladder, okay? There's no indication that they're going to give up this wish. And some of them have looked ahead, and when they have control of their groups and things change, there will be more open access publishing for them. But that's a general picture. And I thought it was relevant to what, I mean, it fits in with your particular views on this, but it's what our views are as a research group, most of whom are information scientists. I'm the only one who isn't really an information scientist, but I am now, because I've been faculty position, so forth. Okay, I thought that would be useful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great session. Bob Campbell, great session. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Dr. Schmidt about the hybrid journal, because you're assuming a hybrid journal where the article becomes open access after the embargo of 6 months or 12 months, and therefore you're objecting to the hybrid journal, presumably because it isn't giving instant open access, which you see as a basic feature of open access, understandably. There are, however, some hybrid journals that make the version of record available free on publication. As you know, the Royal Society does that. I guess you know. So surely in that case, you have no case against that journal, and you can't exclude that from the system, because it is actually, although it's a sort of hybrid journal, it is giving open access on publication and therefore fulfills the definition of open access. So in your objective to destroy hybrid journals, there is this, at one end of the spectrum, a type of journal that doesn't really fit your target.
Well, I don't want to destroy anything, let me be clear about it. With regard, I talk about the Royal Society path to compatibility with Plan S. And as long as indeed people publish in a hybrid journal, but we are going to get no embargo, there will be no embargo, there's a CC BY license, and the VOR, the AEM will be available, that is fine for us, as we made it quite clear. That will then be compatible. But you ask yourself a question then, what is then still the value of, the balls and the nuts which we put at the end in order to then to give it a nice format and to print it out? What will be then the use of libraries still to subscribe to these things if they will be available open access in any case? Anyhow, you're absolutely right, and I call that the Royal Society path to compatibility.
But there are Royal Astronomical Societies.
Sorry?
The Royal Astronomical Society.
Yeah, for instance, there are more of them.
Bernd Pulverer also
Just following on from that, there's another type of hybrid journal which is open access for the research papers, but not subscription-based for the other types of content, such as reviews and commentary and journalistic content, such as the Journal of Clinical Investigation, although they take copyright, which is obviously a big no-no for Plan S, and I would agree with that. But what would be to say against a model like that, where you really focus on the research papers? Because I think that's what we need to share openly, really.
Well, we Plan S, we don't talk at all about all the other useful commentaries, reviews which are happening, and that you ask a subscription for that, no problem whatsoever. That's absolutely. We are clearly say, if there is a scientific publication coming out of a public grant, it has to be in full and immediate open access. But all the other activities which are related to outreach, which are related to commentaries, reviews, whatever it is, commentaries, they can be based on a subscription-based model. There's no problem whatsoever.
But the authors are still supported by grants. So
Sorry?
maybe you could add some clarity, because those authors are still supported by research.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I talk about the venue where the publication takes place here.
Saskia.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Saskia de Vries. I'm from the Fair Open Access Alliance, and my question is about transparency, of course. I understand that transparency is one of the parts of Plan S which replaced the gap, the gap. And I was wondering, in this new deal with Wiley, is transparency part of it? So will Wiley make open what the costs of their APCs will be?
Answer is yes, in 30 days. So the agreement with Wiley, the contract with Wiley, will be made public in 30 days from now. And this 30 days, as was explained this morning at the press conference as well, has to do with that Wiley has to inform the societies, for instance, and they want to do it themselves and not in another way, and also with some filing requirements, some details that I also don't really know, and I don't want to say anything wrong. We felt very strongly that in the end we want the contract to be open, and we did not consider it a problem and acknowledge this situation with Wiley, with his own societies, that we were happy to say, okay, then it takes 30 days and then it will be public.
But I meant something else.
Okay.
I meant, is Wiley prepared to make open the costs of their APCs? Because that's the transparency Plan S asks for. There's a journal which just flipped to MIT from Elsevier, and MIT is prepared to put up on the websites what the costs of their APC will be. And I understood from Robert-Jan Smits that this was part of Plan S.
Robert-Jan Smits has to say what really is part of Plan S and what he wants. This is not what we requested from Wiley, not even discussed. We discussed fees for articles being published and how the prices are being communicated. Also, we have to communicate it to all the universities and participating institutions, and all that will be made public. What the underlying model of that is at Wiley, that is none of our business, and that is not made public. I mean, that is a different issue. And on the situation with Plan S, to my opinion, that is fully compliant with what Plan S requests.
Absolutely, and you don't need to, I think you can calculate quite easily what is all behind it, because you mentioned 10,000 articles are going to be published per year. There's a certain price to be paid, so I think it will not be that difficult to calculate what is going to be charged for the production of an article. I think everyone is quite interested to see in 1 month's time, of course, the contracts, and there we, of course, will know much more about it. And I think it makes no sense to speculate about it now, but I'm also quite keen to see it. I see that in the meantime, the representative of the young researchers has arrived. Because Ralf, as I mentioned earlier on, we have been talking a lot about the young researchers, but I think it's also good to let them talk, because we have been having a lot of meetings with them. Didn't always agree, let's be clear about it, but I think it's better to let Koen say a few words himself about how young researchers look at this issue of open access, and also whether it's a generational issue, as Gerard O'Neill has often mentioned.
So thank you, Robert Jan, for giving me a second of floor. So it's true what Robert Jan had been saying before, that he had been consulting during the construction of Plan S and during the implementation phase 2, like the development of the criteria for implementation, with young researchers. I'm a representative of the Global Young Academy, and we have also worked together with the different young academies of Europe to write a statement about Plan S. And as Robert Jan correctly mentioned, we are not maybe happy about every detail of Plan S, but we are very much behind its intention and the goals that Plan S is trying to achieve. In general, the young scientists are very much in favor of open science and open access. At the same time, we acknowledge that the young scientists often have difficulties in the current system, and especially if open access becomes the norm, the current system will have to change at the same time. And that is really something that we, if Plan S is going forward, that we want to advocate and want to explore together with Coalition S, but also together with the publishers. Like, how can we change this system that isn't working for a number of the stakeholders right now? How can we change this system into a better direction? Thank you.
May I just want to add to that as part of the partnership from Deal with Wiley, it was already announced that we will have these meetings where we, in particular for these reasons, like you mentioned now, we would like to hear the voice of the young scientist, and probably also wider than just from only Germany. And it would be very good if you would be actively involved in this with your network.
Hi, it's Liz from F1000, and I have a funding background, so I used to work at the Wellcome Trust. I'm kind of really interested in this discussion, particularly around Plan S, and the fact that Plan S is needed is because it's taken us over 20 years to even get close to open access for, across the piece, and it's really important. But I do wonder whether we're missing the boat a little bit, because since we've been trying to flip to open access models, actually technologies come on, researchers are sharing their work in much more different ways and in much more different formats. So I'd be really interested in the panel's view on, why aren't we as part of Plan S, never mind being able to read the actual research, people want to be able to use it, people want to be able to get to the data, and that's what open science is. Open access is a facilitator, but it doesn't make open science happen. So I'd be interested in your views on how we can deal with that issue, because while you're there, trying to make people be open access, they ought to be thinking about actually making the data and all the things that you want to use available. So I'd be interested in that.
Thanks for the point, Liz. I mean, we would strongly echo that too. I think the solution that I would propose is that we should agree on common standards, open science attributes that we all think are valuable, and then start to monitor compliance of some of these. And they don't have to be in the classical research paper form at all, as I tried to say in the talk. But certain values could be attached to certain attributes of open science, and then funds awarded accordingly, I would say.
Yeah, I've always said that people in 20 years from now, or perhaps even 15 years, look back at this debate here, they will laugh. They will laugh because, oh my God, they still talk about journals. They don't know about journals anymore. They're packages of data which are, shared on different platforms. So I think if I look at what's happening in the film industry, the music industry, the changes are going to be amazing in the next years to come. And that's why I think in a number of years ago, people look back at this debate and say, my God, what an interesting but bizarre debate, because we now work in a completely different way. It will be platforms, specialized platforms, which offer all kinds of services, and that's what the future is going to be. And the ones who are jumping on that are the ones which are, of course, going to make the big money. And data analytics will be a huge issue. I mean, that will be a big money maker for many of the traditional publishers. And you see already that many of them work going into that direction. Data analytics is, of course, the future.
Günter Ziegler also wants to.
Perhaps two small comments. I mean, one comment is also from the deal point of view. I think we are great, and we think that open science is very important. We think that reviewing is very important, and all these new mechanisms and all that. But none of this was a part of the deal negotiations. That's in that sense, this is not our business. It's also clear that, of course, there's all kinds of publishing models. There's publishers over there. There's ideas about how scientists themselves do their work and organize it and do their own journals and all that. That's again very interesting things, but it's not part of the negotiations that we were supposed to do, but that we've been doing. The second comment is basically on competition. I mean, one observation is that a published paper is not a good that you can trade. And as a scientist, if you need access to a paper, you can't just take another paper if that's cheaper or if this one is too more expensive. In that sense, there's no market for the published papers because they are different. On the other hand, of course, there is a market at the point where scientist decides where she or he wants to publish her paper and what's the conditions there. And in that case, the question what publishers offer is a very important one. And indeed, the question what publishers offer, what fellow scientists offer, what societies offer is very interesting. And there, indeed, there is a market. And what they offer, of course, is not only getting your typeset paper into print and selling it to the world, but there's the review process, there's everything else that's included in open or non-open science.
So if I just may add to that a brief remark, if we, so we've indeed only been focusing and talking about open access of scientific publications and not as much about data and such. When I give presentations about this to researchers, I always tell them that as a research community, as researchers, we have made a mistake. We have just given these journals, these articles away. And now we're complaining that we have to get this back and we want to get the copyright back and we want to get it readable for everybody. But of course the publishing business could do this because we let them do this and we have given this away. Please, let's not make the same mistake with the data again. And let's be more careful with that. And that's the most important message that I convey to the researchers. We'll keep control of that ourselves, please.
No, Liz.
Sounds like a whole conference in its own right. That sounds fascinating. Liz Marchant from Taylor & Francis. This is really for Robert Jan Smits. I think I'm starting to see that what you really care about is that the article that publishes the outcomes of research that Plan S funders fund should absolutely adhere to your requirements, which is CC BY, zero embargo. But I think what you've also just shown is that actually you're not trying to dictate what else it sits alongside. You're happy for it to sit alongside a review or a commentary that's under a subscribed content model, but your article publishing your research has to adhere to it. So I guess my question is, how do you feel about other primary research articles that have been published under a subscription model appearing alongside these articles? Do you have a feel for that, or are you just happy that your article is absolutely compliant?
Well, the end goal is very clear for me. It's open access. No embargo, CC BY license, VOR, AM. That is what it's all about. And for the rest, the models or the business models which will allow that to happen is up for the publishers and for the science community to sort it out. How it's going to happen, what procedures or mechanisms they are going to apply, that is up for the market to develop. We want that the output of publicly funded research is no longer behind expensive paywalls. And that is our objective. And it's up to the market then to see how they're going to deal with that. And the transformative agreements are an ideal mechanism to have this transition to exactly what Plan S is all about, I would like to achieve. So we are not, with Coalition S, prescribing new business models for the market. We just simply say, we have a certain goal, we have a number of principles, and now markets, you get organized and come up with innovative models.
So thinking about, I mean, at Taylor & Francis we publish a lot of journals and we're perfectly capable of building transformative agreements, I'm sure. But you heard here from a lot of learning societies and other organisations that have a very small number of journals. So for them particularly, but for all of us, are you saying that so long as the article that publishes the research that's been publicly funded by Plan S funders is absolutely compliant, it doesn't matter what else happens within that journal? Because that matters. You know, there's some titles here that if I just wanted to sell that one journal to a library under subscription with a certain amount of very clearly delineated content that comes under a subscription, and completely separately I offer content that's under an open access, fully compliant open access model, is there a problem in that? Can we or can't we do it? Because the Learning Societies with a small number of journals, this really matters to them. They're not going to be doing the big transformative agreements that we do.
I'm very much aware about the, say, learned societies who have just a couple of journals which they publish. And that's been also one of the points I mentioned this morning when I gave my presentation. I talked last week in London with the representatives of such a learned society, a small paper. 80% of the people who publish there don't have a grant. How are we going to deal with that? That's why I say this is what I call the category of sincere concerns about the transition. And these people will not let go down. We're not going to drop them. We're going to continue the dialogue with them. We had in the meeting rooms some 20 there, and there are many more. So I would like to bring them together and to see what we can do from the side of Coalition S to help them to flip their journals into full open access. Because what I liked about the meeting in London and some of the people who were there last week is that they all are committed. They want to go to full open access. They just have difficulties in getting there. And I think there we have, as funders, taken the responsibility to reach out to them. As a matter of fact, the Wellcome Trust is at the moment having a call in which they put financial means available to help these learned societies to flip their journals. So we already are, as we speak, doing a lot to talk to them, to facilitate the process, because I don't want that these learned societies who do fantastic work are going to be let down or have to close down their business. On the other hand, they have to also start reflecting about how proactively they can transfer the system. One of the arguments which was mentioned last week in London is that we as small societies, we cannot be part of a transformative deal. We are being told you go to make your deals with individual universities, they cannot be part of the big deals. Well, I said to them, how many of them are you? Why don't you not sit together and create a consortium? They have enough scale and scope to be a serious partner for a big deal. So, I mean, it also requires that from the learned society themselves, they think a little bit more in an innovative way so that they become active players in this transition to full and immediate open access. So it's not only what can Plan S do for you, but it's also what you can do for Plan S.
For those, there's a request also. Yeah, Raphael Ball was here, and there's one in the.
Yes, Raphael Ball, ETH Library Zurich. Yes, I'm a librarian. So I have a small comment or remark to Professor Meijer from Max Planck Society. I like China as a wonderful country, and I like Chinese people, but I'm a little bit surprised that you are so happy with the commitment of Chinese delegation with open access, and that you are seemingly happy that there is a command from the highest level of China for open access. I personally do not believe in the highest level of China. I believe in democracy, human rights, and freedom of expression. And my question is, or I ask myself, is the Max Planck Society meanwhile so far away from the political reality that they do not see that the political and the scientific system in China is a brutal competitive system, it's a highly suppressing system where nothing happens which is not for the benefit and for the advantage of this country? This is my question, and I think it is a little bit, I have my doubts that you are calling China as a witness, the witness for open information movement.
Your argumentation is demagogical, and it's unacceptable. Because I'm serious. I just quoted what happened at the open access meeting, and I quoted the statements that were made from China there. And for all people that were present at this meeting and at that meeting, if I represented it wrong, I would like to hear it from them. I did not use any qualifier when I quoted this. I just quoted facts. And you have to be very careful when you make in public these statements. No, it's not a threat. I just gave a report on what happened on the open access meeting. I gave a report on the statements that were made there from the different countries. These statements were made the way I described them. I did not give that any qualifier. I found some of the statements that the person from China made pretty pointed. That it was pointed out that they are the #1 publisher in number of articles per year, and that then this person from China added, and count on it that it's going to remain for this for quite a while. This is just the truth, whether we like it or not, and what we think about it or not. And I just reported that here. And you now insinuate in your questioning that I would subscribe to whatever happens in China. I didn't say that. I just gave an objective report, and I hope you acknowledge that. That's all.
Hi, I'm Rodri Jackson from Oxford University Press. I have a question that's hopefully going to be less incendiary. Although it's quite a specific question actually, and Ralf, I kind of need your perspective on it as well. So at OUP, I think we agree with everyone that transformative deals are a good way of moving towards open access. It's something we're trying to do more and more. As such, I was a bit disappointed when I saw the Plan S implementation guidelines, which say, and I quote, "The negotiated agreements need to include a scenario that describes how the publication venues will be converted to full open access after the contract expires," which the way I read it, and perhaps I'm reading it incorrectly, but I thought it was enforced by Robert's talk earlier, suggests that at the end of the transformative agreement, all of the journals covered in that deal should move to a complete open access model. So that's my reading of it. But Ralf, I was then confused that you said that the Wiley project deal or agreement is compliant with Plan S. So does that mean that Wiley's journals are all going to be 100% open access at the end of that deal? Or have I completely misunderstood?
Rodri, where are you? I heard you, but okay. But okay, now okay, good. No, of course, that's a well-informed and smart question. But of course, there is no agency to certify at the moment precisely what is compliant or not. There's a consultation process. The implementation guidelines will be updated, and more concreteness, more guiding principles will be developed. We have also had several conversations. My personal opinion, which is not officially certified, is that it would overburden any of these transformative agreements alone if they had the responsibility to make sure that, I don't know, a set of journals or the entire portfolio would be flipped. That is not, well, cannot be reasonably the case. And we also will give our feedback and precisely on that point during the consultation process. We believe that this has to, some more precision has to be entered. But even if it is formulated now, you could say that this qualifier applies only to agreements that are done next year. And everything before 2020, agreements that were signed earlier, are exempt from that specific thing. But I don't want to split hairs here. I'm just saying that transformative agreements by themselves must be a viable way to be Plan S compliant. And of course, and this is also what we who propagate OA 2020 think, that this cannot be, transformative agreements cannot be the new standard model to be perpetuated for the next 2 or 3 decades. So they have to be a transformative, an interim element, but it's not, it cannot be completed within the time span of a 3-year agreement. The ultimate success of those agreements, whether they can be transformative or not, will show whether more and more other countries and institutions from also other regional areas of the world will also request this kind of agreement. And then we will create the mass that is needed to finally transform the system and at some point then the rationality for subscription would just erode to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore to perpetuate that system. I hope that was clear, and I hope that from your perspective that I did not put myself into trouble with the Plan S community here. I'm always blinded by the light. I'm sorry, I see hands, but I don't know exactly who it is and the order.
Hello, this is Matthias Wald. I want to add a comment to this China discussion we just had 2 minutes ago. And I want to get this a little more less political, and so folks, let us be a little be more pragmatic on this topic. Well, just to share some figures with you, there's a paper being published in Learned Publishing in August this year with a student of mine from Wuhan University. And I'm happy to send this to you if you leave the card of yourself with me. And from that paper you can easily see where this open access sort of statement of the Chinese delegation in Berlin comes from. How many STM journals we have worldwide in English language? 6,000, 8,000, something like that? I have no idea. In this paper it's said that there is about 300 English language STM journals, not only, but primarily STM journals from China. So that's probably 5% of the whole. And many of those are under joint ownership or distributed by the big publishers here in this room. So this message from this Chinese delegation you are referring to is very clear. It is the attempt of the Chinese publishing industry to gain influence internationally, because open access opens to them the market to enter under subscription. You see, if they would publish all these Chinese papers, which are now published by the big ones, by themselves under traditional model, would not work, as you can understand. But under open access, it does work. So please read that paper, and then you understand this message. It's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Arnaud, we have...
I have the microphone, and if I may.
Yeah.
Finally got it.
Okay.
I think my name is Jasmine Lange, I'm from Brill, CPO there. And I think we all got today that transition agreements are a great way to make Plan S a reality. And I think that it's more like a call to Plan S, Coalition S, and the funding bodies there, in particularly for the humanities, which is underfunded and which is not publicly funded by research institutions. It would be a great way to move to open access. So those transition agreements, in particular national deals, we would very much appreciate if those funding bodies and national coalition partners would also start talking to the 50% publishers, or the publishers that produce 50% of the output, which are small to medium-sized publishers. And I understand that you start talking to the big ones first, totally acceptable. But please think about that and open the door also to publishers which do not publish 1,000 journals. Thank you.
It's a point very well taken, and it's very correct that you state that. It is very pragmatic to say if you want to change this, we have to first also talk to the bigger publishers, but we certainly not forget the others. There has been what in particular has to be done, and this is really has to change at the university level and the research organization level. The money flow needs to change. Right? I mean, the money that is now actually in, say, library budgets at universities needs to be used for publishing and no longer for subscription fees, and it needs to be pooled with money that is often locked up in research budget from individual researchers from which APCs are paid. If you do that at a university level, you will also find means via that way to also support the other sciences. And universities need to do this. I mean, when this all started, when the first offsetting deals or transformative agreements were made, I mean, the universities know perfectly well how much they pay via their library budget to each of the different publishers. The universities had no idea what they actually pay, that is what their individual researchers pay to the same publishers via individual APCs, because that was not accounted in a way. Actually, Max Planck does that. Max Planck has an overview of that. And so these money flows at the universities and at the research institutions, and that is being done now, need to be reorganized and need to be redone to be able to also make that for those fields possible, and they should certainly not be forgotten in the negotiations. I can say that we started with the larger ones, but we'll certainly also negotiate with all the other ones.
Well, Max Planck Digital Library, I have to say, actually always talked also to the small ones.
Yes, thank you for acknowledging. If we continue now on the principle that whoever holds a microphone can continue to talk, then we obviously have a problem even to make it to dinner on time. And with the respect, we don't have a speaker. Or not? Is it true? Don't we have the? We should wrap up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was. Yeah, but right. We have a lecture, and then there's as a matter of respect for the lecturers, of course, we should not take away too much of her time. So I apologize for those, and I see Christian Sprang holding the microphone, and he has been waving for a while, but so have others. So I know that not everybody could speak up in that session. I apologize, but you could see that there was really a very large interest. Some of the presenters will be around for dinner and also perhaps for tomorrow, not everybody, but please continue the conversation on an individual basis. I hope you find this session interesting, as I did, and I would like to ask you for a final round of applause for our panel. Thank you. And I was going to say one word on Günter Ziegler. He had responsibilities and had to leave a little bit earlier. We knew this, and so that you